everyone. This is Bob Samuels from Tech Connector and Tech Resources. We're a B2B lead generation company. We pride ourselves in being able to learn about and share best practices and introduce you to some industry leaders. And today, I have one of my favorite people, Scott Brinker, will be joining us, and we'll be talking about a fun topic around agentic AI and the disruptiveness of it on the landscape. So, Scott, if you can introduce yourself to some of the folks that may not know you yet, and a
Yeah,
little bit
well,
about yourself, about ABM, about AI, and then a fun fact that someone may not know from looking at your LinkedIn profile.
it's those fun fact questions that are always the tough ones. Well, thank you for having me. Yeah, so Scott Brinker, I've been in the marketing technology space for pretty much my entire career. So originally built a SaaS company called Ion Interactive many years ago. After selling that, I joined HubSpot and for 8 years built out their technology ecosystem. I just left HubSpot back in September. But during this whole time period for the past 17, 18 years, I've been writing a blog called Chief MarTech. It's really about this intersection between the world of technology and marketing. If you've ever seen that crazy landscape of all those marketing solutions out there, the 15,000 or whatnot, my apologies. That's one of the artifacts I've produced over the years. And yeah, and now generally do a lot of like analyst and advisory work around marketing tech. So yeah, we're excited to chat and share with you some of the latest research we've been doing around what's happening with AI and AI agents in MarTech. As far as a fun fact, boy, this career, I mean, I guess any MarTech career, you'd have to say accidental, right? These things didn't even exist. But even the whole like tech world was kind of an accident for me. My original career mission was as a musician. Originally went to the University of Miami and studying like music production and keyboards, and I did a little bit of the computer stuff on the side. Well, anyways, that's how it turns out, which is a good thing because as a musician, yeah, I was always so-so. Maybe on the computer MarTech side, I'm a little bit better at it, but it was great fun.
You found the right career.
It
I
found me.
grew up, I grew up in Miami and was a University of Miami Hurricane fan and all that. So.
Oh yeah, okay, go Canes.
Okay. So good. Thank you. And so I think so I've got some of my colleagues, Spencer and Evie, are going to help uh, help with our audience with any questions they have. Want you all to feel comfortable contributing to this discussion. It's not a one-way chat from Scott. It's a discussion, thoughtful, hopefully spirited discussion about agentic AI. If you can, or when you're ready, put something in the chat and tell us when you're ready, or raise your hand, and we'll bring you up to this virtual stage to ask your question or add your comments, and then we'll bring you back into the audience. So let me start with sharing a much smaller graphic, a much more easy to read graphic than the huge MarTech graphic, and this is on the three types of agentic AI. And Scott, if you can just kind of just give us an overview of what the three are and how they're distinguished and kind of examples of some of the categories. We can share this as well as the link to your report with the attendees
Oh
afterward.
yeah, great. Yeah, that report, and it's ungated. It's just a PDF. We just released it last week. It's 127 pages, but really trying to look at where things are at in a very pragmatic sense with MarTech as we head into 2026. And of course, what is the most common theme being talked about now is of not just AI, but it's been AI agents and agentic this and agentic that. So we tried to spend a lot of time just digging into okay, what's real with these technologies right now, but also how do you think about them? Because a lot of people are using the terms agents and agentic, and we want to try and help people get a sense of the different kinds of agents that are at work in marketing's world. And we, because we love little logos and categories on slides, that's what we do here. We broke this up into essentially three, I call it three domains of these AI agents. The first domain is agents for marketers, which is by far the most common right now. And these are tools that many of them are even built into your, existing MarTech platforms that help marketers do the work you do. They help with, like brainstorming ideas or, content production or doing data analysis. How do we like assemble a campaign or an audience? Some very helpful things, and they're improving very quickly. But it's all behind the scenes. It's all things that we're using to, get more efficient, typically, at the things we've already been doing. The second category is agents for customers. Now, these are agents that we as the marketers, or more broadly, our go-to-market teams, like we deploy to engage directly with customers. These are things like the customer service chatbots that are ubiquitous on websites, AI SDRs in e-commerce, these on-site shopper concierges. And it's really important to note that while they are for customers, they're for customers to use or for engaging with customers, they are very much controlled by us on the marketer side, on the seller side. This is what makes it very different with this third domain of AI agents, which we call agents of customers. Because this is AI technology that customers, that buyers are using under their control. And we as the marketers, we don't have control. We don't have a lot of visibility into this. The most obvious example of this is, when people are using things like ChatGPT or Gemini or Claude, and they're doing deep research to discover and evaluate who are different vendors we might work with on a particular category. What are my options? What do people think about them? What's the pricing differences between these? All this like research and engagement that previously people had to often interact directly with our business, whether it was our website or our sales org or whatnot. But more and more, these buyers are able to do this in their own sort of cocooned, AI assistant environment. And it's that AI agent that is either during its training or during sometimes it's like live, search and engagement is acting as an intermediary between us, the seller, and that is the buyer. And so we can spend a lot more time chatting about that. That is, in my opinion, I mean, don't get me wrong, there's a lot of cool things across all three of these domains, but it's those agents of customers that I think are truly the most disruptive for marketing. And we'll see where 2026 brings us.
Thank you, Scott. And I see several questions out there. I don't know if there's any that we should do now, but we can lots of activity. Let me go to ask. Let's ask our first poll question, and then we'll go from there. So, our first poll question, we'll talk about the first category, which is the agents for marketers. So I'll go ahead and launch that. Everybody can see that, and then we can keep talking. So the agents for marketers. So that's some of the tools for creating messages, maybe researching, maybe prioritizing accounts, that sort of thing.
Mm.
We're asking. So there's two separate questions in the poll. One of them is, I don't know if you can see it. Yeah, having to do with what percent of your world is assisted with the agents, and which one, how much of it's purely human, and then what show those types of agents, the ad production, the personalized email, the campaign execution, and so forth. What are those that are being used now or likely to automate this year? So what's your guess, or what are you seeing out there, Scott?
I mean, so from some of the data that we included in our report, I think for question number one, in general, most people in that small baby steps or sizable minority portion. That's still a lot of experimentation out there or limited production deployment. Because let's face it, the stuff is new. We're still learning how it works. We're still trying to figure out the right governance around it. The second one, actually, the question just disappeared on me.
Yeah.
But I would say yeah, we actually have data in the report. Oh, here's the data. Okay. All right. You already have overachievers with some doing, a lot more of a majority heavy reliance. The personalized email content, that's exciting for this group. I would say our research data showed that more people at this time were doing it around targeted audience segmentation, partly again using AI to like help them in audience discovery and assembly. But yeah, personalized email content's fantastic. So.
Yeah, lots of, and one thing that's interesting in the first question, no one's sticking with just human right now. So everybody's at least dipping their toes in the whole agentic for marketers
I
world.
mean, again, even, when you talk about using these tools simply even as brainstorming partners, or even being able to, one of the very simple use cases I've just always found helpful is like if I'm writing something, I write it, and then I will ask the AI to critique it through different
Yeah,
lenses of like,
yeah,
okay, well, if you're a CFO, what's going to be your thoughts on this? What are going to be the questions you're going to ask that I didn't answer? So even when you're just using it in some of these simple ways, it's just such an incredible way to augment
yeah,
the scope of what we think about.
yeah. Does anybody want to, if you want to raise your hand, maybe comment, explain your answer and explain maybe something you're seeing that's pretty cool out there, or if you have any questions for Scott about any of these things. Oh, I share the results. Yeah. Okay. No hands. Let me just see if there are any questions from the chat. All right.
Do
Okay.
B2B marketers understand how B2B buyers are using AI? Um, they're starting to get that memo pretty quickly. So
Oh my
one.
goodness, there's six hand raisers.
No. All right, I'm going to let you run this.
All right, let's do that. Let's do that. Okay. Okay. So, Natasha, I'm going to bring you up to the stage and ask your question. We got Joel and Nancy and Troy and Louise are all lined up. So,
All right.
lot of action. So let's go from there. Okay.
That's
Here's
interesting.
Natasha. How are you? Nice seeing you.
Doing good. Good to see you too. Hi, Scott. Believe it or not, we presented on the same stage over a decade ago. So good to see you,
Ooh.
kind of.
Well, glad to be back on the stage with you.
Yes. Couple comments and questions. I'm at a company called Simpro Group, and we're in a very interesting space where we serve trade businesses. So people who run commercial electrical, HVAC, plumbing. So we're kind of
People I
almost
never seem to be able to get on the phone. Those people.
exactly,
Okay,
and we're
got it.
trying to help make that happen. Um, One of the places we've been using, we've recently been honored by Six Sense and Mutiny on the way our teams have leveraged in the areas you described, Scott. So like personalization, targeting, et cetera. We're definitely getting more and more pressure to scale content through the use of AI. But where we recently saw a big win, I just wanted to share it, was in competitive intel and win-loss. We work with a Price 360, who is amazing, led by Tim Rhodes, formerly at Eloqua and other places. And that's like much more on the secret shopper side. And then we were kind of just leveraging sweat equity for all the things sales ask for, but it's questionable whether they use them, like battle cards, et cetera. Then we started evaluating the platforms like Clay, Crayon, that are pretty hefty and pretty expensive. We're running into now what some call AI native or AI first platforms, and we recently piloted one called Hindsight.
Mm.
Um, it's amazing. Sales is adopting it like crazy, which hardly ever happens. But I wonder how much you're seeing. I've read the report that Bob, you were kind enough to share. So we've got the customer, um, the agents like HubSpot, et cetera, where they're just adding agentic capability. How much do you see a displacement? happening there, or maybe a displacement of the more niche players in the MarTech landscape in places like competitive intel and other places like that? Just curious.
Yeah, it's a great question. So I have some high level data, and I also like anecdotally have things I'm seeing here. At the high level data, in the report, that was one of the key questions we asked is we wanted to know like, okay, are you using AI to replace things, enhance things, or do entirely new things? And it was something like 30% are using it to replace some existing
Mhm.
functionality. More so for larger businesses. The larger your business was, probably the more crap you had hanging around in your tech stack,
Right,
the more opportunities you had,
right.
to replace things with AI. SMB is a little bit less so. The vast majority, like 83, 84%, said, oh no, we're largely using AI to enhance on top of existing capabilities we have. And then the third option was like, oh, well, are we using AI to do things that weren't even possible before? And I
Mhm.
want to say on average is around 40%. Um, but it split in the other way where small businesses were much more likely to be experimenting with
Mhm.
entirely new
Interesting.
use cases than enterprises. So that's the like high level data. Anecdotally, I would say you're generally right. There's like a certain set of use cases, like competitive intel, frankly, even being able to do um, stuff like some of the things we've been using with Gong and some
Yep,
of these meeting
yep.
recording things, some of the early players in that space. It's now actually it's become so commoditized for a lot of the core
Mhm.
capabilities there that people are replacing some of those larger systems with just simpler AI components. But the other thing that's happening there at the same time is, a lot of the major MarTech platforms, Salesforce, Marketo, HubSpot, you name it, like they are, I guess they all got the memo that, by the
Yes.
way, AI is threatening to disrupt your business. And they're like, the hell, we're going to let that happen. So, I mean, they've all been going, full force into like incorporating more AI capabilities into their products. So I generally am not seeing those major MarTech platforms get displaced yet. But yeah, the smaller point solutions, it depends on what the point solution is.
Right, right. Exactly. Yeah, makes sense. How much do you see, if at all, the landscape that you cover in terms of AI running up against actually marketers building their own agentic go-to-market themselves? And I know like people like Liza Adams and other people out there really helping. That's a really interesting use case for enhancing what we're doing, but in a pretty significant way.
Yes, that to me is the single most, well, all right. One of the two most exciting things happening in MarTech right now is, we've been moving for many, many years where there was less and less custom software and more just like commercial packages.
Yep.
Um, But those were challenging because, again, like a commercial package, it's designed the way the vendor thinks things should work, and increasingly businesses have their own opinions of how they want their internal operations to run or how they want a certain customer experience to build. It just wasn't practical for them to build and maintain a lot of that
Yeah.
themselves. But AI is changing that equation. And so you are now seeing people do more and more build. Now, the key is it's not all build or all buy. And we generally see people continue to buy these commercial platforms for like a lot of core capability. Like you don't want to be vibe coding your own email server. What would
Yes.
be the point? But when you start talking about like, oh, here's a particular experience I want to have for a customer. Here's a particular workflow,
Yeah.
I want this sales team to run. Yeah, actually building that yourself is not only feasible, it's getting to a place where it's pretty advisable as the way to like
Yeah.
differentiate the way in which you
Yeah.
operate.
And I'll get off the stage after this, but just a comment, like our sales teams have gone wild with like running deal plays, et cetera, with their agents. And the competitive solution we do use in real time helps them with objection handling, like through integration with Slack and pulling from Clary. So super exciting. And I love the approach you took to kind of break it into three categories. The other thing I'd quickly say is with customers leveraging AI, we are, I hesitate to say it, but leaning more into the analysts again to get that credible content out there to raise in the search of AI. So just another use case, but
Yeah,
more
indeed.
traditional feeding than new. So take it away, Bob.
Excellent. Thank you,
Good to see you, Natasha.
I'm gonna bring Joel up, and then I'll bring you back. Thank you, Natasha. Yeah, good. Lots of interest out there. So now we'll hear from Joel. Joel, how are you?
I'm great, thanks. How are you doing? Great to be here. Um, just by way of introduction, I started my career in advertising promotion and brand marketing, big budgets, big teams. I always have to go back and fact check. Did I really have $100 million budget? Were there really 60 people on the team? Whatever, large corporations. And I always tell the story of how my best business friends were the account executives, on my Madison Avenue agency or whatever. And I started drinking the digital Kool-Aid in like 2000, 2001, 2002. Very early customer of Eloqua, crashed WebEx doing a webinar like this with 1,000 people trying to register or trying to log on at the same time, so much so that the CTO of WebEx invited us out to be like, what is it that you guys are doing? Anyway, so I've been around for a long time in this space. And one of the things with digital, and I so most from 2010 to 2023, I was at SAP, and using automation. What I've seen, my best friends were always on the sales team. If you could deliver, you're giving great insights on who's on your website. You're looking at who's opening emails. You're using third-party data, now first-party data. Anyway, there's a lot of great insight. One of the things, and the previous speaker just said this, I forget the name, but teams gone wild. So one of the challenges that I see is that while all this technology has helped marketing and sales align, so the whole marketing and sales alignment that we've talked about the past number of years, do you see with this technology that if teams go wild and sales is doing their pilot and marketing's doing all their other things, and all we're doing is just bad automation with friendlier interface, we're going potentially backwards. I'm just curious your point of view on how do we put guardrails on this so that we can actually be valuable partners to our sales colleagues.
I absolutely love this question, Joel, because I get asked this question from two different sides. I get asked from like the actual brand marketer side, like, wait a second, now that everybody can do all this stuff, how do we make sure this doesn't turn into complete and total chaos and slop? But it's funny because a question I get frequently asked by people who are in the MarTech vendor world is like, oh, what's the opportunity for us to build? What can we build? It's a great opportunity. And my answer is actually the same for both of those, which is what is missing right now is a really strong orchestration layer to like how this stuff can work. Something that can have the sort of guardrails where when you start, whether it's creating your own little app or you're creating a particular agent or automation, or even like in creative development, it's one thing to give people all these tools for, doing creative that they couldn't have done on their own before. Great, they have all these wonderful ideas, but there is some concept of like brand and brand standards and so to me this is the next stage of where things are going to be really exciting for so many of these AI technologies is, yeah, the underlying power is incredible, but to actually be able to harness it and scale it, we need to have this sort of governance structure, this orchestration structure around it. Now, it's probably going to will it get worse before it gets better? One of the challenges is most of the MarTech vendors I speak to, they recognize this. They see that's the opportunity, and it's almost like, I don't know, I just picture this thing boy, this would be the time where if I was a sports guy, I'm sure there's a sports analogy for this, but it's like the football. I'm just going to make this up. You can tell me if I'm wrong. Like the football is just there in the middle of the field, lying untouched, and like everyone is jumping on it, and it's total madness and chaos. It's probably not allowed in football. Anyways, the point is, I do think we are going to see technology advancement that makes this better. One example I'll give, just to make it concrete, is are you familiar with a product called Gamma that's being used as an AI generation of slides? It's worth taking a peek at. It's pretty cool. They just did a big funding round, as of course many AI companies are these days. So they started out with this really cool AI tool where you can prompt it and it creates these beautifully designed slides for you. Well, I mean, that's nice, but if I was going to give that to my sales team so they could create custom crafted, pitch decks for, client opportunities, I actually don't want them using that if it's like I don't have any control over it. What's going to be the brand? How's this going to be represented? How's this going to look? So this was a big objection, for Gamma. And they spent the past year essentially developing, okay, how do we set the right sort of guardrails and the templates and the rules and the structure so that marketers can have very tight control over a set of, what's doable or not doable with these slides. But within those guardrails and that framework, you can then empower, sales reps to like, okay, well, I actually know very specific things about this client, or, I want to like reference this particular thing. And it's actually pretty effective. Now, again, that's relatively easy because there's only so much space, that you're working with creatively with a slide deck. But as a model of where I think this stuff needs to go, that's exactly the sort of thing. We need guardrails around it. So.
That's great. Well, I'll throw in one more. I'll drop off, but around trust. So my focus these days is on patient trust in healthcare, and same thesis as all of this, that technology reduces friction. When deployed properly, when it's not, it impairs engagement and therefore it diminishes trust. So when you kind of jump to that future state with your agents of customers, the job remains to reduce friction and build trust. Those agents. If I'm going to create an agent and I put it out there to buy a ticket for me or something, I don't know. How do marketers design their stack, and maybe how do customers of those marketers design their agents so these buyer side agents sort of recognize me and the kind of trust I want to have in a brand, so that we have this low friction, trustworthy choice. I mean, this is getting way out into the future of your future, but I don't know if you have any parting thoughts on that. I'll leave you with that question.
Yeah, no, it's really interesting. I think this is why I say that like agents of customers, I think is where the real disruption is going to be over these next couple years. And you can already see because right now these agents of customers, they're being paid by the customers, right? I'm probably paying more than I should, to OpenAI and Anthropic
Right.
and all
Me
that
too.
every month.
Yeah.
But as a result, like their agency is to me, and they've started adding these capabilities for both like greater memory of like, okay, Scott, I can keep track of like what's important to you, what you're working on, what's, in the middle of. They're also getting more agentic in the sense that you can ask them to do more and more tasks on your behalf. And some of these things that are coming out with, ChatGPT had announced earlier this year, what was it, the instant checkout, they've got that commerce protocol. So, I could start to ask the AI to actually make purchases on my behalf within certain parameters. And so, yeah, this whole thing of like, okay, well, what brands do I trust? I think these agents of customers absolutely want to learn that, and they absolutely want to operate under your direction. And I think where things then get interesting for us as marketers is, all right, we've had, you know, the whole history of marketing is a chance to figure out like how do we win trust with other humans? What do we do that wins trust with
Right.
them? we've had maybe 25 years of experience of like, how do we win trust with the Google bot, which is a single agent? So like, it puts us in the appropriate position we would like, in search results. It's kind of like an expansion of that is we're going to have to figure out over these next 5 years, okay, what do we as marketers need to do to signal to the much wider variety of AI agents what they need to know to develop a trust that they would then be willing to pass on to the customers that they're actually working for.
Right.
And this whole field, we'll maybe talk a little bit about AEO and GEO, this sort of evolution from SEO to like, how are we as marketers in a position to influence these AI engines? But it's very early and it's very fluid. So, yeah, not a
Well,
lot of solid
thanks for the
answers at the
insights. I'll
moment.
let Bob get on to the next
Thank you,
question.
Joel. Yeah,
Awesome.
yeah. So I'm going to
Thanks.
bring up Nancy, and then Joel. Thank you very much. I'll bring you back. Appreciate it. Wow. Okay. Good deal.
Thank you, Courtney, by the way, for that football thing. It's a fumble.
The
So in a very meta way, I just fumbled the analogy about the
fumble
anyway.
Okay, am I on?
You're on it. We can't see you, but
Oh,
that's okay.
sorry. I think I
There we
did.
go. That's better.
I need some remedial training. I
There
made
you
myself a
go. You'll
panelist
have to
instead
stay
of attendee.
afterward.
First of all, hi Scott. Well, nice seeing you again. Last time we met was 2 years ago at Mopsapalooza.
Oh, yes, yes, yes.
Yes, missed you this year. And
I
then
know, but I heard it was fantastic.
yeah, it was. And I'll see you, Bob, next week. So
Yeah,
we're
look
all
forward
good.
to it, Nancy. Thank you.
Okay, so I have two questions. The first question is everyone is racing to implement agentic agents, right? So for startups with tight resources and trying to develop repeatable processes, what have you seen as a successful AI implementation roadmap? And when do you see startups being able to implement agentic agents? And where do you typically see they start, right, where they have success? That's one. Second question is during this time of lots of experimentation, have you seen companies outsource agentic agent development? Is that a big thing, or does it take a lot more maturity before one would outsource? So,
Okay, great questions. So I guess I would say, yeah, particularly if we're talking about smaller businesses or startups or things like that,
uh-huh,
usually my recommendation right now is to leverage a lot of the AI that's built into these core MarTech platforms.
right.
Now, I just came off of, an 8-year stint here with HubSpot, so I know a lot about HubSpot, so I can talk about it in HubSpot's context, but HubSpot's not your only choice. You have a lot of choices out there for it. But like one of the things HubSpot has done over the past couple years is just embed a lot of agentic capabilities into their core products so that you can have, workflows that actually call out these AI LLMs to do things like, research a customer or a prospect and, interpret an email and possibly be able to like propose answers. And it's great because like, again, you probably need one of these products anyways for your business is like a CRM and a marketing automation. And so to get some of those agentic capabilities for automation and workflows natively in it, you don't have to do a lot of additional work of finding more specialized tools. Now, that being said, as you start to get more mature, you might want to do things that go beyond what those products do. I would say there are two platforms being used for agentic automation and agent creation that I see is very popular. One of them is Zapier, which
Mm-hmm.
the original iPaaS has now evolved into being a very powerful, like agentic automation tool. Um, and then the other one that I'll give with the caveat, it's a little bit more technical. But if you're a little more technical, people seem to love it. It's called N8N. And that's again, it's a visual way of building agents and agentic workflows, but a lot more flexibility, a lot more power, a little bit more complicated to use as a part. But it's from a cost perspective, it's absolutely within the budget of what a small business or a startup can do. Okay, so I think that was the first question. The second question was it about like what they're actually using those implementations for? You know, this is funny. So there are two things that people typically need to have in place to really effectively harness these AI capabilities. One is they need their data in a good shape. Because so many of these tools, like they can do really amazing things, but you have to be able to connect them to your data. This is again another reason why if you're using AI within one of those larger MarTech platforms, it's nice because the data is already there, but for a lot of companies, as they start to expand the use cases they want to do with AI, their biggest challenge is like just getting the right data from elsewhere in the org, making sure it's good data, and then feeding it in. But the second biggest challenge that people have is AI can do amazing automation of process, but you actually have to know what the process is you're automating. And it turns out a lot of companies, there's a lot of things we do that actually aren't very well defined processes. And those tend to be very hard to, that's where you start to get a little bit of the chaos of everybody doing their own version of it. But the flip side of that is if you do have certain processes, particularly those that tend to be a little bit more labor intensive or they're very manual, those are usually the first use cases where people are able to say, oh, I wonder if I can apply AI to this. So like a great example would be, I'll give you two examples. One would be, like a content production. Like, okay, I'm going to do this, say it's a blog post or I'm going to do a video. There's the actual assembly of that. But then once I've got it, how do I distribute it? Do I like break it up into like little micro pieces of content that point back? How do I make sure I've got like the right reference links? So when people are, coming through, how do I tie that to a dashboard? Those are actually things that if you know step by step how you want that to work, you can actually have an agent do a lot of that process for you. And you can also do it in a way where you as the human, you can make sure at any of the points along that process, you can be like, I want to review this before it goes out. Not a bad idea. The other example would be, and I think, yeah, someone else was talking about this, was like in B2B, like in a, sort of prospecting thing. And okay, as I'm doing a set of steps to learn about a prospect, prepare a call for them, get the materials together, have like a follow-up sequence I want to do with them. Again, if you have a well-defined process for that, today it's often involved a lot of manual steps. A lot of that can now be like codified into these agentic workflows or AI agents that if they don't do it all for you, they certainly can assist with a lot of it and accelerate it along the way.
Okay. And I think the second question was, with everybody racing to build agentic agents, do you see any class of customers outsourcing that development?
Oh, right. That was the one. Yeah, well, actually, again, this is another one of these questions where I get asked the same question from different points of view. So it's one thing to ask like, hey, can we actually outsource some of this development? The other question I get that's the inverse of that is there's a lot of agencies and service providers and people have built really great digital services businesses. That business is now being disrupted because boy, a lot of the things that used to do manually, AI is accelerating. And they ask like, well, what do we do with our business? Well, one of the things you can do with your business is, there's tremendous demand from clients, to like help them build out these AI agents and these AI automations. And one of the things that is always given in these services companies an advantage is because if they start doing something and they're going to do it for many, many clients, that they get really good at that, they see the patterns across different kinds of businesses, they can do a lot of value as, an outsourced provider to help make those things happen. So I know some businesses, again, I know the HubSpot ecosystem a little better than some of the others. I know a lot of the HubSpot solution partners, are very much leaning into providing that sort of service, but I expect we're going to see that across most of these solution ecosystems.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Nancy. And going to go bring up the second poll question. We're behind schedule, but there's no schedule.
It's my fault. I ramble.
Well, no, I mean, it's good questions, and I hate to cut people off. So, Nancy, I'm going to bring you back to the attendee role and then come back and join us afterward. So, All right. So can people see the poll, I guess?
It's back.
Okay. I don't see any answers yet, so I don't know. Can everybody see it?
I can see it
Okay,
now.
here we
I
go.
can't
Here we
answer
go.
it, but I can see
Okay,
it.
now we're starting. So, so Scott, you can see the questions?
I can.
So these are Agentic AI for customers. This is so the first one is are you actively using the Agentic AI? The four, which is really chatbots and such, right?
Yeah, well, I mean, the three most common ones I see are AI chatbots. There's these AI SDRs, which are worth a conversation of themselves.
And those are
Um,
inbound or outbound or both?
Both. And it's a great question because there's some of that that I think is more helpful than others. I'm just going to put my cards on the table. I absolutely despise the concept of AI outbound SDRs. I think that's the beginning of the end.
Yeah.
But we can have that discussion. And then there's, in B2C businesses, you tend to see some of these things like, shopper concierge agents on, e-commerce sites and whatnot. But
Yeah.
we'll see what people are using and we can talk about what they think is
Okay.
most relevant.
And then the second part of the second set of questions, second question has to do with confidence in the AI agent's ability to successfully qualify a prospect or before a handoff. Is it how much trust does one give to that the AI agents can be acting well on the company's behalf to make the process this hybrid AI human process efficient and effective for everybody.
Yeah, definitely people doing it.
Okay, give it like 10 more seconds and we'll let people finish, but pretty got some decent answers. I'll go ahead and stop sharing and then we can share the results.
All right.
Can everybody see the results now? So on the first question about the agentic AI for the chatbots, the concierge, and the AI SDR, more used than not. Only a couple people are humans only. You know, 20% are not yet. Yes on 70% is yes for basic and for actively engaging. And then the second part has to do with how confident you are, and it's kind of mixed. No confidence at all is in the least place and slightly skeptical, but 75% are moderately or highly confident that the agent can do its thing. How does that compare to what you've seen? And then I'll bring up Rachel to ask a question.
So I would say on the first one, particularly these things of like chatbots on a website, that are designed to basically answer inquiries. Certainly customer support, customer service, but people are also using them, particularly in B2B, as buyers are earlier in their discovery or evaluation stage. Instead of having to hunt around your website or necessarily have to call your sales org, they can go in and they can engage. Your chatbot to hopefully get more of those answers. And we are seeing pretty good adoption of that. One of the things is it's funny, these chatbots on websites, I mean, they've been around for years, but I think, we can be honest, they have largely sucked. I mean, they've just not done a great job for the most part until very recently,
Yeah.
because like connecting these LLMs that are so good at conversational interactions, and also you're seeing people get better and better about connecting these chatbots to the right data on the back end, their knowledge bases, their ticket histories, more of their like sales enablement resourcing and whatnot. Yeah, they're actually getting pretty good. And so you're seeing like typically 60, 70% resolution rates on some of those interactions, which is fantastic. So that I definitely see. The use of qualifying them, you asked the very important question here of, in this whole AI, SDR, BDR type thing, inbound or outbound. I think for inbound, it is actually a very legitimate way to use this to get through just some of the early qualification work that you were going to have a human do that was very rote anyways. And so it lends itself very well to AI. Um, I am very skeptical of AI outbound, but I'd love anyone who disagrees, Ms. Pui, to come on the stage and give their perspective. The way I think about it is for all sorts of automation, I've always looked at it by a 2 by 2 grid. Is it efficient for the company? Yes or no? And is it efficient for the customer? Yes or no? And hey, there's no doubt about it. These AI SDRs, they bring a lot of efficiency to the company, right? I can get rid of all these SDRs. Hey, we can send 1,000, outbound emails, custom crafted to each individual, like, every hour. What an amazing thing. Um, the place where I get skeptical is like, I'm not so sure on the buyer's side if all the companies they deal with or all the companies who want to deal with them just start accelerating the number of outbound reaches that are coming at them. I just don't think that's a delightful experience for the customers. And I think it's actually going to lead to people putting more of an agentic layer in front of their email so that they don't even have to look at this stuff. They can like let an AI agent, an agent of the customer, you deal with all that crap, and I'll let you know when I am interested in learning something about a company. But anyway, that's an end of rant. Thank you. I'll get off my soapbox.
Thank you, Scott. Rachel, nice to see
Yes.
you.
Hello. Nice to see you too, Bob.
I
Hey,
imagine you
Scott.
guys know each other.
Yeah, but just like LinkedIn friends. I don't know if we've met in real life, Scott, but huge fan.
Thank you.
Um, it's interesting hearing your last bit. I have a question. It's related to several things that I've heard you say. But a little context first. From where I sit, so I work at Snowflake, right? And from where I sit, I think this is maybe a little forward looking, but I think a lot of the problems that we run into with agentic AI, period, but specifically in all the use cases we're talking about, is the limitation of an agent being run by one model for one use case, right? So, like for example, we can build something that's just on ChatGPT or just on Claude or just a agent force agent, right? But you're going to run into an issue where it is only able to access the data that is in that space, right? And then how do you trust it to be correct? And I think what we're kind of moving towards is going to be like a network of agents that are connected through MCP, through different things, but with a center of gravity that comes back to like your single source of truth for data, right? So your data has to all be connected. Then you've got this agentic conversation that's happening on top where agents are talking to agents. And a lot of the things you've talked about and that Joel brought up earlier, how do we trust that it's going to represent me correctly? How do we know it's not making stuff up? That's really going to become key in 2026 as companies like scale, right? What are the evaluation processes? How do you observe what your agent is doing? What kind of trust do you have that it's accessing the right information? And I think the key to that's going to come to the context that you give it, the governance that you put around it. But again, that just comes back to your data. And I know you're like, I said amen in the chat, like your data has to be organized first. In your experience talking to MarTech vendors, is there a shift towards being open to connecting that data? A lot of MarTech vendors have wanted to hold it really tight, right? But like for agentic AI to actually work, we're going to have to open, break down some of those barriers to let agents talk to each other and have it truly be multi-model so that they can also observe each other and kind of keep receipts. Anyway,
All right, so I don't know if you're setting me up or like I'm
I'm
going to be
setting you,
setting
no,
you up, but this is, you're like, oh, and
sorry.
by the way, I'm, at Snowflake, so I've actually said if it wasn't for AI, the most exciting story in MarTech over the past 5 years here has been actually this emergence of a universal data layer. People using things like Snowflake, because the problem
Yeah.
I'm talking about with data, it isn't limited to AI. This is the problem we've had with data in the entire history of MarTech is all these sorts of point-to-point integrations. It's just been very complex and very fragile, And so this is my words. I'm not actually, you aren't paying me to like,
No, I'm
promote
not.
Snowflake,
No.
but like one of the things about that model, it's very exciting is like, okay, well, if everything feeds data into the universal data layer and everything can pull data out of the universal data layer, then this actually becomes a common integration plane across everything that,
Yeah.
don't get me wrong, there's definitely a lot of other things you have to do because, all right, first step is now we can have data flowing across the org. Yay. The second thing is, well, wait a second, the way sales defines this data is different than marketing, is different than ops. There's a lot of work that people need to do on on top of that to really make that usable. But still, I think as a universal data layer, that is absolutely the direction I personally see all these things going. This thing about the governance around it, this goes back to that earlier question here around orchestration and whatnot. That is where the battlefield is going to be now. How do we empower people to do things, but that make sure they're doing it with the right permissions and the right guardrails and the right structure. And again, this is one of these things where the more sort of universal platforms you have at the center of your stack, that is really the best choke point in which to enforce that kind of governance. So
And do you
I'm sure
see
we could
vendors
have a whole
open
webinar
to
just
it?
around that.
No, I know.
But
Yeah, I didn't mean to open up a can of worms, but I just think it's so interesting. And I do from, my limited point of view, I've seen vendors be more open to it, but in your conversations, do you see people being like, okay, let's integrate, let's do more of an API, let's talk about MCP, right, for our agentic solutions. Do you see
oh,
everyone
so I
kind
mean,
of leaning
again,
in?
and this isn't just my pet peeve. So for the however many years, 18 years, I've been, doing this MarTech analyst stuff. Every time you survey marketers and you're like, what's the biggest challenge to actually getting stuff done? It's always budget. Okay, so let's say I always need more budget. But then the second challenge is almost always integration. And it is a really sad thing that for years, so many of these MarTech vendors treated integration as a second-class citizen. They're like, no, 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 we're building our product and this is its feature. And yeah, yeah, integration, that's other people's stuff. But for
Hmm.
the buyers, this became increasingly their top priority. Like, listen, if I can't integrate this with the rest of my stack, it doesn't matter how cool your stuff is. It's the tree falling in the forest. I can't actually hear it. And so, again, I have a dog in this fight. This is what I specifically did at HubSpot for 8 years of no, you've got to actually open these platforms and get these ecosystems so that they can integrate. And I think for the most part, most MarTech vendors have come around to that because, quite frankly, in the sales process, it's become one of these qualifying questions for buyers that if they can't integrate, with their systems, they take you off the evaluation list. Oh, wait, listen, I know we're going to run out of time, but there's one thing you said I wanted to just point out, a little controversial, but you said okay, well, we don't fully trust these AIs to do what we expected them to do. And this is a legitimate problem. And this is, again, where that orchestration and governance can help. But as a thought exercise, I just would like you to consider what makes you think the human SDRs and sales reps are actually saying things and delivering things like the way you would want? Because
True.
I think there's actually more non-determinism, in some of these human systems than there are possibly in some of the AI layers that we're bringing to bear.
That is a great point. Yeah, humans are very flawed, I guess, at the end of the day, right?
But no, we're non-deterministic. We're
Right.
creative, prone to hallucination every now and again.
I love that. That's a good point. Thanks,
Yeah, that
Scott.
reminds me. Yeah, so the analogy is pretty similar to the self-driving cars in Uber. If Uber versus Waymo, which one do you trust better? Because they're both, there's some flaws in both.
Yeah, exactly. And in all seriousness, and in that report, I had a whole section where we talked about sort of these trade-offs between deterministic and non-deterministic, because it is trade-offs, and depending on the use case and what you're looking to optimize for, one approach might be better than the other, and there's some cool ways you can blend them. So, um, but it's definitely where the interesting. This is where all the new playbooks are being developed. Is okay. How do we work with this? It's a new beast.
Thank you, Rachel. I'm going to put up the last, we're running out of time, so we're going to launch the third poll, set of poll questions here. People can see it. There's two parts. This is the agents of customers. So here we go. Got our first responses. So result is the rise of buyer side AI agents of customers. So that's mostly the the chat GPTs and so forth of the world, right, Scott?
I'm just looking through this. Yes.
So
Yes. And by the way, I was just looking at the chat too. I want to acknowledge Kelly's point about Dremio as, again, another one of these sort of universal data layers and how they're using that in MCP to pass data across all these things. That's
Yeah. All right. Give everybody another 30 seconds. Okay, I'll go ahead and stop it. So I'll in the poll, share the results.
Mhm. I love this crew. You guys are all very much yeah on the frontier of this.
All of the above.
Yes, I'm
That's the
like,
big winner.
that's smart.
And then the second question, it's optimized on AEO and AEO/GEO.
Yeah, which is I won't say that's completely obvious all the right ways to do that because they're still emerging, but that's certainly where the most practices have become known. Things like the developing AI proof value propositions and trust. That's much more the new frontier and a little less well defined how to do that.
Yeah. I'm going to bring up Dan shortly and ask his question, and then we'll have a few minutes. And then, I usually ask, what do you see in the next 3 to 5 years? But that's too big a time frame. It really should
Yeah,
be
it's like, what do
be
you see in
six
the next three
months,
to five months is
3 to 5
feels
days.
more like a time frame.
That's a tricky one.
Yeah, exactly. The next 3 to 5 days. There was that one week at the beginning of October when like OpenAI did like a series of like seven crazy announcements
It's
one after
amazing
another.
how
I'm
things
like,
have changed.
just stop it, slow down, stop.
So Dan, your camera's not on, but if your mic's on, go ahead and ask your
Okay.
question.
Hi. How you guys doing?
Hey, Dan.
Good. Thanks, Dan.
Thanks for the session. It's been very informative. I
Thank
appreciate
you.
it.
Yeah.
So I was wondering about the issue of when you're using AI to help with content, to do research, and the attribution of things, say like Claude or so, it will generate tables and it'll say the source was Gartner, Forrester, and something else, right? And those are the sources that you asked it to draw from, but you don't know which is which, right? So you don't know
Yeah.
exactly how to give attribution. And um, so I was wondering if you guys had any advice on that issue when you're producing content. And it can be other kinds of content too, right? It could be video content or anything like that if you're citing some sources like Gartner.
Yeah, it's a big challenge. The only guaranteed way I know how to do that is like, okay, if AI comes back with a set of information and purported references for it, you actually have to track down those references independently. And so you've sort of used AI as to help perhaps point you in the right direction. Now, this is one of these areas where I feel this is changing very rapidly, and I actually haven't done a very close evaluation of Gemini's latest capabilities in this regard. But this is a direction that I think a lot of them are trying to get better and better at, that you can get very specific reasoning and very specific, like, okay, which was the source you were looking at when you were coming up with, this statement? Um, but yeah, right now I would say check all your sources if it's important. There's not, you keep hearing these stories of like lawyers who have used this stuff and they're submitting briefs to the court, and then the judge is like, no, that just didn't happen, you just made that. Yeah, so if it's important, check it yourself.
Thank you.
Wish
Excellent.
I had a better answer.
All right. So we're up against our time. So two things. One is if people want to stay, after we stop the official webinar, I'll shut the camera and then we can have an informal chat if people want to stay for a few more minutes. But I usually end these sessions with what's going to happen in 3 to 5 years. That's too big a series, a bigger picture. But what do you see, Scott, in the next 3 to 6 months or a year or two, whatever? Or what do you see as a valid time frame?
Yeah, I think these agents of customers are really going to start to take hold. Like, we didn't even have time to talk about it, but like using some of these agentic browsers like Atlas or Comet, it totally allows buyers to hijack the entire web experience of sellers. And the only reason this isn't a bigger issue today is the vast majority of people have no idea that this is possible, how to do it. I think one of the things we keep seeing with AI is the speed of adoption at scale is unprecedented. And so I think the big thing over this next year is buyers are going to start using more and more AI to truly take control of their own customer journey. And the really smart marketers aren't going to try and fight that. They're going to figure out like, how do we do a really good job of supporting those agents of customers?
Excellent. Thank you, Scott. I appreciate everybody. If you want to stay on, I'm gonna officially end the recording. But if you want to stay for some informal chat, we can. But thank you. It's a pleasure. And stay on, Scott, and we'll
Yeah,
continue
yeah. No, thank
after
you,
an
everyone.
after hours session.
Ooh, after hours. MarTech after dark. Mm.